This lesson will cover Chapter 13 on urban patterns, focusing on Key Issue 4. Why do cities face sustainability challenges? We'll be looking at the city challenged, the city renewed, the city contrasted, the city cleaned, and the city controlled. There are many social challenges associated with underclass residents of inner cities. This includes inadequate job skills, poverty, homelessness, drugs, crime, inadequate services, municipal finance shortage, and some physical challenges related to filtering and redlining. Inner city residents have a difficulty competing for jobs. This is often the result of a lack of education. And as the country moves into more of a tertiary sector, many of the jobs are more high skilled related, and other jobs that are more low skilled are starting to go away. Inner city residents may find it increasingly difficult to access the lower skilled jobs like custodial or fast food service because a lot of those are starting to become more distant as they enter the suburbs. And many lower income people find it harder to afford the transportation into the suburbs for those jobs. Inadequate services are also a major feature. Inner city neighborhoods lack adequate police and fire protection, shops, hospitals, clinics, and other healthcare facilities. They also have more food deserts and are especially common in low income and inner city areas. And as far as municipal finance issues, there's a shortage because low income residents in the inner city neighborhoods require public services. May not be able to pay as much or pay very little into the taxes to support the services. So central cities may find that they face a growing gap between the cost of needed services in the inner city and the availability of funds to pay for them. There are thousands of vacant houses that stand in the inner city of the United States and their cities. This is because landlords have abandoned them. Schools and shops have closed because they are no longer needed in inner city neighborhoods since there is a rapidly declining population. Because of this, it has been common for filtering to take place. Filtering is the process of change in the use of a house from a single family owner occupancy to rented apartments and ultimately to abandonment. Many inner city houses are built by wealthy families and were built in the 19th century, but they've been subdivided by absentee landlords into smaller dwellings for low income families. The landlords stopped maintaining houses, and it's because they weren't able to collect high enough rents, and so they cut back on the costs of maintenance for that reason. What this has done is it has allowed the buildings to deteriorate and also has grown unfit for occupancy. Some financial institutions also partook in redlining. We talked about this in the first unit. That's the process by which financial institutions draw red-colored lines on a map and refuse to lend money for people to purchase or improve property within these lines. The Community Reinvestment Act, however, requires that U.S. banks now have to document by census tract where they are making their loans. And so a bank does have to demonstrate now that inner city neighborhoods within its service area are receiving a fair share of its loans. Take a look at Figure 13-58, demonstrating gentrification in Cincinnati. Gentrification is the process of converting an urban neighborhood from a predominantly low-income, renter-occupied area to a predominantly middle-class, owner-occupied area. Most cities have at least one substantially renovated inner-city neighborhood that has attracted higher income residents, especially single people and couples without children who are not concerned with the quality of inner-city schools. Critics of gentrification, however, argue that the community becomes too expensive and pushes out a lot of its poor residents, leaving them with nowhere to go. Much of the reason that people are becoming very attracted to these gentrified areas is because the houses might be larger for the money you put in. The houses may also possess attractive architectural details that are unique, like fireplaces or high ceilings and wood trim. People who work downtown in the inner city may also feel like they live a lot closer and they don't want to get on a crowded freeway.
And then lastly, neighborhoods might be near the cool things like theaters, bars, restaurants, stadiums, and cultural and recreational facilities. Given the high cost of housing in cities, governments sometimes step in to actually own or support the management of housing for low-income households. In the United States, public housing is government-owned housing rented to low-income individuals, with rents set at 30% of the tenant's income. Some public housing projects were located in neighborhoods that are now being gentrified. So the new housing that is replacing the demolished high-rises may be too expensive for the former public housing residents. Take a look at figure 13-60. You see large high-rise subsidized housing projects in the background in the United States, now considered unsatisfactory and are being leveled and replaced with middle-class housing. Figure 13-61 shows San Francisco's ferry building. The ferry terminal in downtown San Francisco has been renovated into a retail center. Looking at figure 13-63, we can see Chicago's African American or Black and Hispanic populations are increasing in more suburban locations, while whites are moving back toward the inner city. Taking a look at figure 13-64, we see that Detroit covers a large area compared to several other cities of similar size or larger in population. In figure A, we see that this difference is in density and it's reflected in the large number of vacant houses in Detroit. And this is a picture of a vacant house in Detroit. Vacant houses or empty lots cover about 43% of Detroit's land area. Detroit has shrunk from 2 million people in 1950 to less than 700,000 now. According to Motor City Mapping, 30% of the city's parcels and land area are vacant lots. 13% have vacant structures and only 54% have occupied buildings. City officials are debating whether to try to help all neighborhoods or concentrate on a handful of them. Many argue that the city should provide enough money to improve just some neighborhoods so that they can concentrate on the brightest prospects for improvement. On the other hand, others believe that all neighborhoods should be helped so that people aren't forced out of their areas that are too poor to move. And also that many of the people need a variety of different services to live a decent quality of life. Take a look at figure 13-65. Now we're going to be focusing on sustainable development. Developed countries produce more carbon dioxide per capita. The average American spends more than 600 hours per year driving. That's nearly 1 month of the year. Our future of transportation will definitely be more energy efficient and less polluting in the future. Many wonder what it will take to change our consumption of energy. U.S. scientists work with the United Nations, for example, to offer strategies on 3 key elements that can be done. First, decreasing the use of the 3 major fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, and petroleum, increasing the use of renewable energy, and that the use of carbon capture and storage be increased, which involves capturing waste and transporting it into storage sites and depositing it where it will no longer enter the atmosphere, specifically by getting it underground. Take a look at figure 13-68. Even as the United States goes toward increasing their dependency on electric vehicles, electricity generation by energy source can implicate that because it may be beneficial in some areas where it is releasing less carbon emissions, but actually could be increasing more carbon emissions because of the reliance of energy through coal on generating electricity. In other words, electric cars are less polluting when powered by energy generated from low carbon emitting sources, not the ones that are generated through high carbon emitting sources. There are certainly ways that controlling congestion and air pollution can happen, and this is something that is actually done in the United States and other countries throughout the world.
Road congestion can be controlled through congestion charges, so charging people extra money when they drive during specific times, tolls, implementing permits, or even outright bans. Air pollution can also be controlled through technology.
This can be done in a number of ways. Through diesel, where diesel engines burn fuel more efficiently with greater compression and at higher temperatures than conventional gas engines. This can also be done through increased sales in hybrid cars that are more fuel efficient. It can also be done through the use of ethanol as an energy source. Ethanol is a fuel made by distilling crops such as sugarcane, corn, or soybeans. Remember, it can be controversial, however, because the amount of fossil fuels that are needed to grow and distill the corn might be comparable to, or even possibly greater than, the amount saved in vehicle fuels. Some people criticize the use of ethanol because it has been said to lead to higher food prices, and they argue that it might be more promising if distilled from biomass like trees, grasses, or algae instead of corn. Some have argued moving toward fully electric cars. So a full electric vehicle has no gas engine. When the battery is discharged, the vehicle will not run until the battery is recharged by plugging it into an outlet. Motorists can make trips in a local area and recharge the battery at night. Out-of-town trips, however, are really difficult because recharging opportunities can be scarce. In large cities, a number of downtown garages and shopping malls may have recharging stations, but few really exist in rural areas. In a plug-in hybrid, the battery supplies the power at all speeds. It can be recharged in one of two ways. While the car is moving, the battery can be recharged by a gas engine, or when it is parked, the car can be recharged by plugging it into an electrical outlet.
The last example is the hydrogen fuel cell, and this is where hydrogen and oxygen combine from the air to produce an electric charge. The electricity can then be used to power an electric motor. Take a look at figure 13-69. Drivers in London's central zone face a special congestion charge during peak driving hours. In figure 13-70, we see a main street in Copenhagen. It's closed to vehicles, so pedestrians can walk freely. So it's actually a ban on vehicles in this region. We have reached the end of our last chapter on urban patterns, chapter 13, and have just finished up our last key issue. So some major takeaways of this key issue include the fact that cities have large numbers of underclass people who also live in poverty. Many cities have areas of gentrification as well as regeneration. And lastly, future cities are likely to be dependent on alternative forms of transportation.